Chris Peaks here, back with Chris Spahagas tonight for our end of the Saturday. Had some stuff go right and missed a few things, didn't we?
I think we did all right though.
Yeah.
Now as we sit here, we're watching the end results of the Ohio State Notre Dame game. We got the winner right, but we're both a little wrong. The Notre Dame did hang with them. So here's the question though: is how good is Ohio State? I have to say that I wasn't real impressed with their quarterback. Yeah, I thought he was pretty horrible, honestly. He did squeeze out a few good passes in that final drive, but he also had a couple that he's pretty darn fortunate weren't intercepted. So I don't think I could see myself having high hopes for either one of those teams moving forward. But then here comes that same age-old question: is there anyone who can really, put them to the test prior to, a playoff game? And I don't think so.
From what I've seen so far, I just do not see a team that's just head and shoulders above everybody.
I think everybody's having an off year right now. I don't really see somebody stick. In the last few years, we've seen Georgia kind of emerge as that standout, and I think the last time I looked, they were up 49-14 over UAB. I'm sure the 14 points. I didn't watch any of that game, but I'm sure the 14 points are garbage time points. So, it's essentially 50-0. But I mean, it's UAB. They got Auburn to come into town next week. So we'll see how that goes for them. Yeah, I mean,
reestablish himself.
I think a lot of these games played out exactly like we thought they would. Oklahoma and Cincinnati. Oklahoma with a pretty decisive win, but not quite controlling the game the way you would expect a team of their caliber versus a team of the caliber of Cincinnati. So I think it kind of showed me that, Oklahoma's, I don't see them contending with teams like Texas and Georgia and, maybe even Oregon. I mean, I don't see them. I don't see them being that top tier caliber team this year at all.
205 pounds.
I see a game still going or no? Yeah.
Washington,
Kansas State and UCF are in a little bit of a slugfest here.
I'm watching Cal and Washington.
Yeah, I had that on a minute ago, but I mean it's 14-0. I think Washington's handing it to them. Washington may be the wild card. I don't want to see an untested. Here's the big thing I never want to see in any year. I don't want to see an untested Pac-12 team or an untested Big 12 team like TCU, waltz their way into the championship or even the semifinal, only to get shown the door because they don't belong there. And I think football fans have a right to protest those type things. It's like, you can't keep putting these teams that, even though they have a good record, even though they have an undefeated record, that they don't deserve to be there because, for whatever reason, their competition's not good enough. I mean, it happens every year. Washington was that team years ago playing Alabama in the semifinals. Alabama made it perfectly clear that they were not in the same league. I mean, we beat them by 23 points and excuse me, I think it was 24-7, but we beat them 24-7, but it wasn't as close as the score, and we fired our offensive coordinator 5 minutes after the game.
Yeah.
So that tells you just what we thought of Washington. And I mean, and that happens every year. Notre Dame's been one of those teams numerous years where, they're an untested team. In Notre Dame's case, you got a team that doesn't even play a conference championship. They come into the playoffs untested and just get completely outclassed in every way, shape, or form on that football field. And the 12-game playoff, I think, will fix a lot of that, but this playoff committee really owes the fans an explanation. And it's like, hey, if you're going to give us 3 playoff games, they need to be 3 quality games, and it just never really feels like we have that. We're lucky to get 1 in the playoff season. And if you look at the playoffs since they started in 2014, you just got to ask yourself, how many good games have we had in that time period? The Alabama Clemson games in the finals were obviously very good, other than the one where they blew us out. But other than that, the Alabama Georgia game was very good. But
I wonder why Notre Dame cannot do it though. What's the deal? I mean, they've got so much money. I mean, they got a rabid fan base. They got tradition. Is it the recruiting?
Well, one thing I need to say something very positive about Notre Dame right now, because I've obviously been very negative about Notre Dame. And I was on our prediction show last night. But my criticism of them was that they've never shown they can hang in a big game situation. Okay. Tonight they did hang. I mean, and they actually dominated the fourth quarter. It was 10-0 I believe it was at the start of the fourth quarter. It might have been Notre Dame might have gotten their first touchdown in the third quarter. I can't recall at the moment, but they were down 10-0. They go up 14-10. They come up with some great stops. The first step is to hang in the big game, which they did tonight. They hung. That was our challenge to them last night. Can you show us that you can hang in the big game? They hung. Now the next step is winning that big game. I mean,
see, that's the thing though, because look at what we talked about earlier in this year about Arkansas, and you just talk about, you said LSU would beat them, and I said, eventually, if you're going to compete, you've got to win these games.
Yeah, these close games. Yeah, if you're going to compete, these close games, close but no cigar type games, you got to win one. And
because it starts, you start getting used to losing. When you start getting used to it,
the big thing you got to remember about Notre Dame is they haven't had a lot of these big game situations. Them not being in a conference, their big games have all come in the postseason. They don't have a lot of quality opponents mid-season, and if they do, it's one game. Let's take a look at Notre Dame's schedule moving forward from here, because I could be wrong, but I'm pretty certain that they don't have much moving forward. So let's look at it thus far. So they kicked off against Navy and Tennessee State, NC State, which NC State put up 24 points on them. See, I think a game like that, when you're somebody with this low quality of schedule like Notre Dame, you've got to dominate a game like NC State. You can't let them score 24 points on you. Central Michigan put up 17 on them. Of course, Notre Dame 40 points in both of those games. 56 against Tennessee State, and then they dropped tonight. So after this, they got Duke. So that's a semi-quality opponent. And that's on the road. That's on the road. Okay. So, and then of course their perennial bragging game is
But if it's using untrusted data,
USC, but we'll see how USC turns out to be. They got Louisville on the road. USC's a home game. Then they got Pitt at home. I tell you something, man, though.
business, you can train.
I did not realize this was on the schedule, but Notre Dame is going to Clemson.
Yeah, they've
Okay, I didn't realize that was happening. Okay, this schedule actually is looking better. With teams like Duke, with Ohio State, Duke, Louisville, USC, and Clemson. And I mean, Stanford has been their big rival game for years, and that's laughable because Stanford hadn't been a halfway decent contender since Andrew Luck played for them. But if they get wins over Duke, USC, and Clemson, hey, I'm fine with them being in the playoffs, even with this one loss. But it all depends on what happens elsewhere. But they are one of those teams, and if Ohio State, of course, wins out from here, that'll obviously make their loss look more quality, especially since it was a last minute thing. But I mean, let's be honest, Ohio State, do they have anybody else to worry about other than Michigan? And last year, was it last year that we had Ohio State and Michigan? Yeah, we had Ohio State and Michigan in the playoffs. That doesn't need to happen again because Michigan got beat handily by TCU, who lost 65-7 to Georgia in the finals. So, but that was all lopsided. But hopefully that doesn't happen again. I have a lot of interest I have some interest in the Notre Dame USC game for the simple fact that USC will play Oregon, which I know we got to get to them too. USC will play Oregon, USC will play Colorado, and once we see how Notre Dame measures up to USC compared to how USC measures up to those two teams, will really show how good all these teams really are. I mean, that's always the big question is how good are these teams really? Does this quality win over Notre Dame mean anything? I don't know. Does the fact that Notre Dame took Ohio State to the brink mean anything? I don't know. Who knows how good Ohio State really is? I mean, it's September. We're not even out of September yet. I mean, the term September darlings was coined for a reason because, in the September, everybody should look great. I mean, their quality of opponent hadn't gotten there yet. I don't. I don't know, but the lack of big game situations in the past is always hurt Notre Dame because they just don't. Now this year their schedule looks better than it ever has, or at least than it has in the last 10-15 years. But if you're not in that big game situation where a truly quality opponent is taking you to the brink, you're not prepared to fight in one of those fights. And I kind of think that's what happened here. Ohio State, just has a culture of being in that dogfight. They have a culture I was sitting here speaking about this with my daughter's boyfriend tonight as we were watching this game. I said, Ohio State's one of those teams, like you and I talked about preseason. They're perennial top 3, top 4 teams.
Right.
They're always hanging out in the top 4. They very rarely win championships, but they're always in that top 4, which means you're going to get good matchups. They're constantly in the playoffs. I mean, I don't know, man. Tell me, has Ohio State missed the playoffs yet since 2014? If they have, it's only been a couple years. They've been there about as often as Alabama has, as far as being the Final Four teams. Now, I don't think they've won very many playoff games. I think probably just 2, actually. I'm sorry, 3, because they were in the finals against Alabama in 2020, or 2020 season, 2021 game. But they have been there. So, I mean, this is a culture that's prepped for the big game, and that does have a lot to do with it. That does have a whole lot to do with it. And it's kind of like I said at the start. Notre Dame got to where they could hang with one of the big boys. I mean, it's going to take being in that situation more times before they can get the win. They do have a great fan base. I was watching game day this morning. I saw Vince Vaughn out there doing his thing, and the fans there. I myself have visited the University of Notre Dame before, and it wasn't even a game day. But it was a game day, but it was a road game, and but just the culture there, the feel, you had guys coming out of the dorms and tossing the football around. I mean, it's a football town, and it does have a wonderful culture. And I myself am not fond of Notre Dame because they impersonated championship teams a few years, and wasted a BCS championship and a couple playoffs and semifinals. I really don't like it when a team wastes that, as if you may have picked up on that. But until then, I had actually been somewhat of a Notre Dame fan. Obviously, Alabama's number 1, but I always watched Notre Dame and rooted for them because, I, like everybody else that grew up in the 90s, saw Rudy and cried. And because of that, I'm like, oh, I love me some Notre Dame too, along with my Crimson Tide. But then, I think the way they handled the hype going into the championship games that they were a part of, and just some of the trash talk that came from the fan base kind of made me turn on them and made me say, you know what? I don't like you guys anymore. All right, you Catholic boy touchers, you ain't my friend no more. But it is still a great team with a great tradition and one of the great college football traditions. And it's always fun when it's relevant. So, let's see how their year pans out. If this ends up being their only loss, and then I can't say that it's not a great year.
So, Clemson, I thought, I mean, they almost pulled that right upset, but they hung tough.
Well, yeah, man. I think, kind of like I was saying last night, I said that they're better than that performance against Duke. And I think they showed it today. I think Florida State might have gotten exposed a little bit. They've got some inexperience at that quarterback position. They made the points when they had to. But man, my heart breaks a little bit for that poor Clemson kicker who just joined the team a week ago. And had the opportunity to close the door there at the last seconds of regulation. But Clemson knows, and Dabo Swinney knows that you're going to get into situations like that, and they just did not perform very well in overtime at all. And Florida State showed, hey,
There's some questionable play calling too.
Yeah, they needed to move the ball and not just go. That's right. They had that little swing pass on the out. That was a really bad call. They needed to be a little bit more aggressive and try to move the ball and get a first down and not not take their young quarterback behind the sticks. Yeah, it was pretty bad, but at the end of the day, I think Clemson showed that the collapse of that program has been greatly overestimated. They went toe to toe with one of the better teams in the NCAA right now. So I think that you can't really play coroner with the Clemson dynasty just yet. Yeah, they've got a couple losses, but this loss was against a very quality team. And I think they've still got a good chance to, put together a good year. Unfortunately, I believe Clemson and Florida State are in the same division, so there's no chance for an ACC championship berth. Although that would be a lot of fun if they got to play Florida State again in that championship. But unless Florida State takes a couple of L's, actually, I guess they'll have to lose 3 times in order for Clemson to get in. So that's unlikely, but they can still finish with a strong year, quality bowl win and come back, next year with, an opportunity to reclaim that throne at the top of the ACC.
What did you think about Texas A&M and Auburn?
I think it went almost exactly like we thought it would.
I didn't think they would just hammer them like that.
Well, I mean, it stayed kind of touch and go competitive for the first and second quarter. And, by the time the second half rolled around, they ended up being too much and kind of ran away with it. But I thought it went pretty much like I expected it to, kind of chippy. Auburn actually came out pretty strong in that first quarter, typically when you have a game in that kind of environment, greatly favors the home team. We talked about A&M having one of the better atmospheres in college football, and that's difficult to overcome. And usually that home team with a great atmosphere is going to have a really good first quarter. And I didn't really feel like A&M really kind of established any kind of real, presence of authority in that first quarter. It took them a minute to get going, but yeah, I thought it went about like I expected it to.
I didn't think either one of them had any kind of offense.
Yeah, it didn't really look like it was a strong performance. That from either one of them, honestly. Like, which that also has been my perception of Auburn every game this year is that they've been winning games, but at the same time they're winning them and not looking very impressive. But so it's only a matter of time. I mean, I think Auburn's still going to be a 4 or 5 loss team this year. I don't envision them. Obviously, they're going to drop it to Georgia, most likely.
I could see them losing. I could see them losing to Arkansas.
Yeah, after the way Arkansas played today, I can see Arkansas beating them. I mean, LSU, Alabama, if they can play the way they played today, which we'll get to that.
They just gotta hurt Arkansas so much, man.
Say again.
I mean, that's got to hurt Arkansas so much because they lost that game.
And you do kind of wonder, does these games where they come so close, does that hurt them more than it would have to lose more of a decisive game of like, between
Well,
13
I
and
think
20
when you
points.
look, I think
But
when you lose
I will
games
say
like
this, that Arkansas does seem to take a licking and keep on ticking. I haven't really noticed that affecting them,
But I think when you lose like that, you get a culture that and you continue to lose those close games, and you don't feel like you can win them because I've seen for years Kentucky would have leads over Florida and Tennessee going in the fourth quarter and blow them.
Mhm.
And
Yeah,
when
I mean, you kind of think that it does break a team's spirit, but I think when it's a team like Arkansas that hadn't been, a championship contender, over these years, and you compare it to a team like Alabama, a team like Alabama loses to Texas and people feel like the world is ended.
right.
Meanwhile, Arkansas loses to LSU, and it's like, man, we sure came close, but that's the way it's supposed to happen. And Arkansas loses to Alabama, and all these other teams that they, I've always said that Arkansas is one of my favorite teams to go and watch in person because it's going to be a good game. It's going to be a competitive game. And, but you also feel that it's a game that, Alabama can win handily. When's the last time Arkansas beat Alabama?
I think it was Saban's first year.
Okay, that's what I thought. I thought it had to be at least that year, maybe even beyond that. But I do remember, I think it was 06 that I do remember them losing. So if they beat Saban in his first year, you mean Arkansas beat Alabama 2 years in a row? Because I know they dropped it to them in 06.
Yeah.
Wow. My, how things have changed.
Ben Finley is capable of leading this offense.
Anybody crying about this year can look back at that.
Finley stepped in.
06, 07 years, not fun.
Quick decisions with the
What'd you think about Kentucky?
Man, I'm gonna be honest. I'm gonna expose myself here as being Bush League. I didn't get a chance to check in on that game. I don't even know what the final of it was.
I think the final was like they did what they were supposed to do. I think the final was like 45-28. They jumped up to an early 14-0 lead. It wasn't nothing to get excited about, or on the other hand, to hold your head down.
And who are they playing? Refresh my memory.
Bandy.
So we're not rivals anymore.
I think with Kentucky, they're one of those. They have strung together some stronger years these last few years, but for them, it's going to be one of those things where it's just like, okay, wait till we get quality opponents to really assess the situation with them. Wait till they play Florida and Georgia, and they're going to be tested. I mean, right now in that SEC East, it's pretty strong. Tennessee's looking pretty good, not half as good as they did last year, but they still look like a pretty strong team. Florida looked pretty good last week. No challenge this week. And of course Georgia. I mean, that SEC East is a real beast. If Kentucky's worth it, they'll get the opportunity to show it. Man, I tell you one game that we both missed big time on was Oregon and Colorado.
Man, I was shocked.
I was half shocked, but half not. Dion and his team of guys nobody else wanted, as it was happening, I'm like, man, I really had it in the back of my mind. This could happen, but I really didn't think, and I will say this, Oregon is better than I thought they were. But let's also remember this. They're another one of those teams that, goes through the season and racks up 30, 40, sometimes even 50 and 60 points. There was one season they were scoring 70 points on teams, but they were keeping their starters in and throwing Hail Mary passes up 63-3, which I honestly think is classless, but they were putting up 70 points on people, but that they still
I've got a
couldn't.
different take on
They,
that.
Yeah, they still couldn't. They can put 70 points up on, these lesser teams, but they can't break 13 against, a team in the playoffs. And I really think there were two real good Oregon teams in this big stretch here in the last 20 years, and that was 2010. Very close national championship game with Auburn that year. Auburn won it.
17 points.
So very close game. And then the Mariota team in 2014 that beat Florida State pretty bad in the semifinals. And I honestly thought was going to kill Ohio State, but Ohio State pulled out the victory. And those two Oregon teams are the only teams to me that showed that they belonged on the big stage when they got to the big stage. All the other Oregon teams on the big stage got shown the door. So and it's kind of another one of those things you're just gonna have to show me, because you think you're something because you put up 42 points on Dion's team. Well, when you come and you play a quality opponent, you still got to play USC, you still got to play Washington. That actually I haven't seen them much this year, but I got the split screen on in the background. That USC and Arizona State and also Washington and Cal on, and Washington and USC both look pretty good. So they're going to be some real strong tests for Oregon. Oregon hadn't been in the playoff conversation in quite some time, so they haven't passed these guys. They haven't been able to get past these teams like USC and Washington. So we'll see. We'll see what they can do. I think Colorado kind of got exposed big time. Man, Deion Sanders is an unapologetic narcissist. I don't say that as a criticism, because you almost have to be one to be a celebrity. But, you take a guy like him that probably since he was in high school has been treated like a king. And especially since he's been in college. And then, he was the big two-sport athlete. He played for the Braves. He played for the Falcons. He did all this stuff. And, I'm not taking anything away from him. Look, to be a career athlete in one sport is impressive. These guys that have done two, hey, you guys, you're awesome, but he's been, he's walked on a red carpet and had roses thrown at his feet since he was, 18, 19 years old. I don't know why anybody would expect him not to be a little bit narcissistic, but I thought when he came out, I don't know if you caught any of his post-game presser, but he to hear him talk about it, it was like they lost maybe 13-10. He was kind of talking about, penalties, killed us. And I'm like, bro,
Nick Saban's offer in the
you
offseason.
essentially lost 42-0 because y'all got a touchdown with 2 minutes left in the game. Though I don't count those garbage time touchdowns for nothing.
Championship.
You got beat by 6 touchdowns.
Really believe that.
Okay, that's not something that penalties cost you. That's not something that, I mean, even a 10 or 13 point loss, you got blown out.
After he'd been running his mouth.
Yeah, I'm like, dude, that you can't sit there and be talking penalties when you lose 42. You lose by 42 points. I mean, that's a blowout, man. That is, you don't belong here. I turned on some of the game. I had Alabama on the big screen, and I had Colorado and Oregon on my phone, and I was sitting there watching, and I'm just like,
I think he's one of the
you can tell if you've watched enough football, you can watch about 3 minutes of a game and tell whether this is competitive or there's one team that's head and shoulders above the other one. And bro, I only needed to watch about 2 minutes of game time to say, dude, Oregon owns these guys. And I know they didn't have Travis Hunter, but
they've been in the top
still,
year in and year out. They pride
how much
themselves.
weight are you going to put on that poor guy? I mean, he's even released a statement that he was injured going into the game and there's a reason players don't do what he does, that playing both ways and all that, because in today's football, your body can't handle it. You're going to get hurt. You're going to get messed up. I've never in my life heard of a hit to the sternum lacerating a kidney. I guess you learn something new every day. I don't see how that happens, but you can't just lean on that guy that hard. You got to have somebody else to play. My question is, why is the guy having to play both ways? Do you not have a corner? Do you not have a wide receiver? Why are you wearing this guy out? I mean, he gets injured in the 3rd game of the season. This is a 12-game regular season. So, if you're going to wear him down to the point that he can get injured like that in the 3rd game of the season, what's going to happen to him in game 6, 7, 8? You can't do that to somebody. It's not feasible. Now, if you got a guy who's primarily a wide receiver and you have a certain package where he can come in and play defense, okay. But when you're trying to put him out there, as the primary receiver, primary cornerback, dude, you're just setting this dude up to just be injured. I mean, and they need to be smarter about that. But I got to be honest, I'm really happy that this happened because I'm getting so sick of the Dion parade. He's already, played the race card numerous times and
that's what got me, that really let me, turn my stomach, is when he said, y'all didn't think a black man could do it. And I'm sitting there thinking, we've had, countless black coaches in the NFL and college that have succeeded. Basketball, I mean, don't play. 20 years ago, if you wanted to play that part, that's fine.
1962 called, and they would like that back. That's what I have to say to that. That, hey, I mean, and I'll even be generous. I'll say 1972, post desegregation and things of that nature. That's where that belongs. Unless you have a DeLorean that's going to take you back in time to the late 60s, early 70s, that crap right there doesn't belong, because you know what? I got news for you. People criticized him because of his tactics. They didn't like the fact that he came in and let the whole team go. They didn't like the fact that he pined, the transfer portal like that. A lot of traditionalists didn't like those tactics. And you know what? Assholes come in every race, assholes come in every shape, size, whatever. You know what? He ain't got asshole, and we don't like assholes. Okay. So don't play the race card when somebody has a legitimate thing to say. When somebody can say, I don't like the way you're doing this, for you to say, well, you just don't want a black man to succeed. That's stupid. And he's pandering it. Not only is he pandering it, but all those people and on ESPN and everywhere else, they're pandering. And I mean, even if they don't come out and say
Well,
it,
you know what else
they
it does
frame
too?
it.
Look what message it sends to these 18, 19-year-old kids that you've got playing for you. That you're playing the race card with them. Well, you're just ingrained it in them to think that way.
Yeah. There was last week. They really should have lost last week too, but last week against Colorado State, Dion was saying something about how he pulled one of the guys to the side and was encouraging him and telling him, your daddy who's incarcerated is watching this game right now with the other inmates and all that. What I didn't hear? I didn't hear what that player's name was. Now that's just me. I'm not saying no one said it, but I'm like, I would like to know if that player's dad is actually incarcerated. That's what I'd like to know. I would like to know if that player that he had that gave that little speech, if that guy's dad is actually in prison.
Kind of the gift Cal needed.
I'm really curious about that, because I'm going to call shenanigans. I'm going to say he does not have a player that has a dad that's incarcerated that's watching, the game with all of his inmate friends. I mean, it's certainly a possibility, but I think I call BS. I call BS on it. I mean, and that's been this whole thing. It's just been this massive hype train.
Do you know what he said? They got me when he first got down there, and I didn't mind this. He kicked one of the players out of the gym in workouts one morning. He had the wrong color socks on, and he said, "I'm old school," and I was like, "Old school? You played for Bobby Bowden at Florida State, and you was high stepping every time you made an interception. When did you ever have a coach that had disciplined you?"
10 minutes to go in the second quarter.
Never.
I mean, Bobby Bowden wasn't a disciplinarian.
I mean, and then he plays for the Falcons, where of course that was back when the Falcons sucked. So I didn't necessarily blame him for leaving there. Ends up with the 49ers, and then of course the 49ers drop a couple to the Cowboys. So if you can't beat them, join them. He comes and he goes to the late 90s Cowboys team, where it was clear that, here's where you can come and do whatever you want, traffic weed, beat your wife, whatever. We'll give you a chance as long as you can play football. So, yeah, I mean, it was Thug Central. They had people.
Oh my God, man!
Eric Williams, that was like, that guy was a straight murderer on the field, man. He was a dirty, dirty player. Great player.
It was bad.
Yeah, I mean,
they had Barry Switzer was the head coach. You had no kind of discipline. I mean, and I know it's hard to discipline anyway, but you had no kind of control over that team.
Well, and I know we're trickling into the NFL here that we try to stay away from, but that's all. I mean, talk of the town for the last 30 years has been Jerry Jones, that he doesn't allow these coaches to discipline properly. And, I
You
was
know what?
actually really surprised when Mike McCarthy took that job. And I kind of wonder if Mike McCarthy actually laid down the gauntlet and said, look, if I'm going to do this, you've got to get out of my way.
See, I think Bill Parcells did that to him too. See, here's my take on it.
That's
I've heard
why it
this
didn't
stuff about,
last there.
I've heard this stuff about Jerry Jones. Jones this, Jones problem that team. And my take on it is, look, Jones is not the one that's dropping these touchdown passes or throwing these interceptions. Yeah,
It's the culture he creates, though. It's the lack of discipline. It's, we talk about it all the time because I know you're a Cowboys fan. It's
but you
Romo
can't
throwing those
discipline
last
grown
minute
men.
picks all those years. It's
You can't discipline
Romo
grown men if you
fumbling
can't.
the snap on a kickoff, on a field goal where he probably shouldn't have been out there anyway. I know he was the
But you
gosh,
can't
I'm
discipline
blanking
grown
on
men like you can college
what's the
kids.
name of that position that holds the field goal?
The holder.
Okay, whatever. Well, I don't know why you have your quarterback in that position unless you're setting up the whole season for a potential fake. But yeah, I mean Romo's first year they had that playoff game and he fumbled the snap. It was going to be it was like a 20-yard field goal, to win the game, and when you don't have a culture of discipline, then you have all of that can happen. And I just think that's what's been created there. I mean, didn't correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't Dallas bring Greg Hardy in? Didn't they bring Rolando McClain after his 1,000th criminal charge? I mean, it's like they really don't care as long as you can play football, and that just doesn't send the right message, if you ask me. I'm actually pulling for him. I've always been a big Dak Prescott fan. I like that he's a man of faith. I like that, he's got this, he's talked a lot about his mother that he lost to cancer and how he fought through that. In addition, you got Tavon Diggs over there who, one of my favorite Alabama DBs, in the Saban era. They had Cooper for a while, which I hate that he's not there anymore, but I'm actually pulling for him. I used to hate the Cowboys in the 90s, but in the last 15 years, I've actually become a little bit of a Cowboys fan. I'm like, just doesn't seem right in the world when they're not good.
So what else want to talk about? We talked about the LSU and all, right?
Before we move to this next game, can we pause for 5 seconds?
Yeah.
ESPN College Football, presented by Geico, is brought to you by Toyota. Let's go places.
One of the most beautiful cities in America, great campus at the University of Washington, and just an awesome stadium, Husky Stadium. And
I promised myself I wasn't going to down this whole bottle tonight, but what the hell, it's the weekend. And we got West Coast games on that aren't even barely at halftime yet. So the night is still young. Probably the only football fan that drinks red wine while I watch football. But hey, it's low carb, low calorie. What do you want?
I guess we need to go into the the best for last.
Okay, wait, we're not actually at the last though here.
Okay.
We mentioned, but didn't really talk about LSU and Arkansas. We talked.
Yeah, let's talk about that one.
Yeah. I was actually really shocked. I was, pretty deep into the Ohio State Notre Dame game, and I just decided to switch it over, and
At the distance to the goal.
and I was like shocked. I was like, oh my gosh, it's like
That hasn't
a
really
one
mattered.
score game, and then I actually turned it on just in time to see Arkansas's big pass and then 2-point conversion to tie it up.
With the punt return,
Arkansas
Penix
did play very well. I didn't really get to see a lot of this game because I primarily was watching Ohio State and Notre Dame. But it's just kind of interesting how how college football goes. The team that is the darling this week is
Johnson lost a couple of yards there.
Is just completely out the next week, and it's like
with a passing
last
touchdown.
week everybody was singing LSU's praises and saying that they were the best team in the SEC and all that, and they didn't look as sharp this week, and I mean,
he just slings it out there.
the long season, we're only 4 games in.
You're gonna have some of those games, though.
You do have to have some of those games, but we're about to get into the real meat of the schedules where the men from the boys are separated, and October to me is always the most fun month in the football season. It's where we really get into the meat of the conference schedules, and we really find out who's a good team and who just had a good start, who was favorable and was able to catch, a team on an off day or off moment. You take like Duke that caught Clemson there in that first game of the season. Well, they're playing Notre Dame next week. So we're going to find out if either one of those teams are truly a legit contender, and even if, the Ohio State team, the Notre Dame team, all these other teams, they may not be as good as teams in times past, but they are who's there right now. They are the team of right now this year. So based on what I saw tonight, I don't think, Ohio State or Notre Dame are going to have any problem contending with the top teams this year. And if Duke comes in next week and takes Notre Dame to the brink, even if they don't win, if they take them to the brink, then I say, hey, maybe Duke's better than we thought. Maybe Clemson did play a decent game in that first game of the season, or maybe they got caught off guard. They weren't expecting Duke to be as good.
$400 reward card.
I just almost went so many different controversial places, but I opted not to. You can edit it out if you want. I was gonna say, you never know when them Jesuits are gonna call in a favor over to the Vatican to go in their little serpent temple and offer up a sacrifice to their Lucifer telescope. But anyway, maybe Duke does have something going on this year, but yeah, I think it's like I say. That one of my favorite football movies of all time, Any Given Sunday.
Yeah, I love that movie.
Any Given Saturday. That's what they need to make. They need to make a sequel to that movie called Any Given Saturday. Because I mean, truth be told, man, here's the way it works. Schedules be darned. All that other stuff. When 2 teams line up on the field, hey, there's a clean slate today. It doesn't matter what happened last week. It doesn't happen what happens next week. It doesn't matter what happened the first game of the season, the last game of the season, whatever. Today, we're just 2 teams that are out here competing and playing. It kind of reminds me of the movie Miracle with Kurt Russell about the hockey team, you know. He gets up there and he says, if we play the Russians 10 games, they're going to beat us 9 times. But they're not beating us tonight. You know, I thought it was one of the coolest things that's ever been said in movies. I don't know if it was real, but I sure hope it was. But you gotta have to have that mentality when you step on the field. And I think in a lot of ways, these teams like your South Floridas and your Kent States and your Appalachian States, you know, that they have that mentality. Like, you know what do we got to lose? And you never know when one of them is going to do something crazy and say, you know what, tonight's our night. And, you know, they may not win these games, but they may take teams like LSU and Alabama and Michigan and you know, Notre Dame, whoever, they may take them to the brink and make them beat them in the last minutes. You know, it wasn't that long ago. I recall, I believe it was 2015 that Alabama played Chattanooga. Chattanooga led at halftime. I think it was like 10-7, something like that. You know, and of course, it was the game before Auburn. You know, Alabama might have been thinking ahead a little bit. Now, Alabama had a lot ahead that year. You know, that wasn't a national title year. But you know, it can happen on any given Saturday in college football. You never know when somebody's going to pull one out. Give me 1 second.
Coordinator Ryan Grubb sneaking Will Nixon out of the backfield, finding another favorable matchup. Running back,
but you never know when some team that you know is being trucked in to basically lose decides that they're going to go off script and say, you know, tonight we're not going to just come in and lose.
Teams are just about even in total yards.
So wasn't you glad that I was wrong?
I was glad you were wrong. I was thinking about the whole game. You know,
well,
I remember.
I was more glad. You know, you wasn't as glad as I was. I was so glad I was wrong.
The way the Cal Bears offense has done.
I mean,
I really thought, and I've never been happier to hit a home run because what did I say last night? I said, and we've got it on. We got the evidence we need. I said, hey, win, lose, or draw, Alabama's playing their best game of the season tomorrow. And they did. And, you know, I knew we had it in the bag when Milroe threw that touchdown pass and he got the wind knocked out of him at the same time. And it kind of reminded me of that movie, Jerry Maguire, where Cuba Gooding Jr.'s character caught the touchdown pass but got knocked out. And then when he came to, he's like, what happened? And they're like, you caught the touchdown pass. You won the game. And he's like, as soon as he gets his wits about him, he starts dancing around and celebrating. It reminded me of that because Milroe, as soon as he got to his feet, ran and gave the crowd a little fist pump. And I'm like, dude, it was one of those moments that was like, I don't know if you remember the 90, I want to say it's 96 or 97 Super Bowl, 97, 98, but 97 season when Broncos and Packers, and, you know, Packers had been in pretty firm control of the game. Elway had his little run where he got spun. And it's like, there's certain moments. The game completely turned around at that point. You know, Elway, he didn't slide. He ran and he got all twisted inside and out and like got the first down, jumped up. All right, let's go, boys. And from then on, it was Broncos. And And you know, I think when teams kind of need things like that to really make them click, and you know, being the diehard Alabama fan I am, I can say that every single season, especially since Saban's been there, there's always been that game when it just clicks and the team's identity truly gets molded.
That's what I was about to say. The second half of that game, they put it completely together. There was no penalties. The offensive line took control. They played like they used to play, before they went to the spread.
Yeah.
The defense was playing championship level.
Defense looked great. And I mean, hey, let's not forget, early in the third quarter, our starting middle linebacker goes down. And for somebody who doesn't know football, middle linebacker is like losing your quarterback. Because it's not just like losing a tackler, it's losing the guy who calls the shots. I mean, it's big. And
that's major.
Yeah, so some young guys that stepped up and played very well, I thought. Middle linebackers got a lot more to do with speed and skill. It's definitely a mental game. And
the first steps. Sure, it can be a handful of times.
But
help from the home.
But hey, we played our whole second half without him. We registered 4 or 5 sacks. It looked like an Alabama team of old, and the challenge is this. Okay, is our Alabama team this year the team we saw against South Florida last week, or are they more like the team we saw today? And we're gonna find out really fast because we've got a couple of tests. We're gonna go on the road. We're gonna go on the road and play Mississippi State. We're gonna go on the road and play Texas A&M.
Story is that he was completely
gotta play Arkansas.
Yeah, gotta play Arkansas. Arkansas home?
I don't know.
I believe they are. I'm almost 100% certain that we were on the road in Arkansas last year, because that was the game that Bryce Young got hurt in, and Milroe had to come in and
you're right.
And play. Yeah. So we'll have Arkansas at home. That's definitely an advantage. Of course, ask LSU how much of an advantage that was, because they were at home with them tonight. I think I'm not going to start saying, this is the 2015 team, we're coming together, we're going to win a championship. I don't know. I'm not ready to go there yet. But
let me tell you what I was impressed with. That damn Milroe can throw that damn deep ball. I mean, better than he can a swing pass. I mean, when that boy drops back, he's you can have a 70-yard touchdown pass at any time.
Yeah, let's just throw bombs. We were talking in my house earlier tonight about the 2020 season and Mac Jones. I don't know if you remember, Mac Jones threw nothing but bombs. He didn't really throw a lot of slants and swing passes. He threw bombs. And
I told somebody what I said, how I would have defended them. I said I would have lined my defensive backs right up on the line, and as soon as they took one step, I'd have just tackled them.
Yeah. So if you got a quarterback that's just better at being a gunslinger, well then let him. And I think, and that is part of it, and I mean, look, we got a young team, a very young team this year, young in age, also in experience. These kind of growing pains that Alabama's experienced this year, that's what happens. I mean, this is a rebuild year. make no mistake about it. It's a rebuild year. You know, some teams your rebuild years look worse than others. Seeing what a rebuild year it is, it almost, I can't help but watch and somewhat lament over wasting
What an absolute
last year.
by the Washington Huskies.
You know, last year, you know, Dallas Turner looked outstanding today. He was there last year with Will Anderson. You know, our defense should have been so much better than it was last year. And I have never been more confident in slamming Pete Golden than I am today, because he's the defensive coordinator at Ole Miss. And it's like, dude, y'all became Swiss cheese at some point. I recognize that defense all too well. I do say a large part of that blame was on him. That was an outstanding defense last year that was poorly coached. And
I wasn't the biggest Bill O'Brien fan, but after that Tennessee game, if I walked down the field, I would have punched Pete Golden right in the damn face. That was probably the best game that Bill O'Brien had ever called. They put up 45 or 49 points, and I would have punched him dead in the face walking off the field after that game.
That was pretty bad. I mean, I
that
don't want to dwell on that too much,
right
but man, since I mentioned his name, Dallas Turner made today one of the greatest defensive plays I think I've ever seen. He late in the game, late in the fourth quarter, in the midst of that drive that Ole Miss put together there at the end, which actually did us more favors than anything, because they milked the clock dry. But right in the midst of that, Dallas Turner got held, had a holding penalty committed against him that was indeed called, but he still got a sack for about a 5-6 yard loss, and they were able to decline the penalty. Outstanding play. I've always loved those outside linebackers that just have that incredible speed that they can run down quarterbacks. That was one of my favorite positions to play when I played football, was an outside linebacker, especially when you got to be down on the line. My favorite position to play. It's a game changer. It's the position of Derek Thomas, Lawrence Taylor, some of the great names over the years, and Will Anderson, obviously another one. And Dallas Turner is fulfilling that role phenomenally. And I think he's the best player on that defense. And I'm just glad to see him, kind of living that legacy of players who have played that position over the years for Alabama. And that legacy predates Saban. Now, I say that a lot when I say predates Saban, because you know what? You and I, and then lots of people even older than us know, hey, there's a rich tradition and legacy that predates Saban. And
I can remember Bryant.
Yeah. Absolutely.
That's how it
is. We got Bryant, we had Stallings, we had Curry, had DeBose. I told
because Curry wasn't, when he was there, they made him out like he was, the worst coach we'd ever have. But Curry, didn't have a bad record. He was 27-10 and won an SEC title.
Yeah, Curry wasn't bad, man. Hey, this is a rich legacy that goes beyond Nick Saban. He's an outstanding coach. I'm perfectly happy that we've had him. But hey, man, our legacy's more than him. Our legacy's more than Bryant.
Oh yeah, I know. It goes back to Frank Thomas and Wallace Wade.
Yeah, look back to the championships in the 30s, the 40s, and it is I mean, I know people talk about. I mean, people talk about, oh, that's contested, whatever. But hey, you know what? Our tradition goes back to the 1800s. Give us a break. You know, I mean, I asked my daughter today. I said, "Do you know where the first Alabama Auburn game was ever played?" She said, "Nowhere." And I was able to tell her that little spot in Crestwood that's next to the Piggly Wiggly, where there's a plaque, and it makes it look like just on
That's
this
amazing,
one
yeah.
day, a couple guys got together and played backyard football, and it was the first Alabama Auburn game. You know, you drive by there now, you can't even imagine that a football game was ever played right there. But that was the site of that first game. And you know, this tradition and this legacy just is so much more than what's happened in the last 10, 15 years. And I for one, as a diehard Alabama fan from the day I was born, appreciate what Saban's done. But you know what? Alabama is so much more than that. And, you know, when I see guys like Turner, you know, running people down and manhandling tackles, I think of all those guys. I think of Derek Thomas and Leroy Jordan, and I think of the goal line stand against Penn State and how, you know, you were able to just muscle. They were able to just muscle that Penn State offensive line and get that guy down. And you know, when you see things like that, it just makes you think of that legacy. I mean, even the DuBois years, you know, the DuBois years, we played outstanding defense. We just didn't really have much of an offense to speak of. But you know, you'd sit there. I was at several of those games. You know, they play. That was back when they played at Legion Field. It was easy for us to go living in Birmingham. You know, and you sit there and you watch that defense get stop after stop after stop after stop, and the offense just can't do anything. And eventually, the defense gets gassed, kind of like they did against Texas and South Florida, you know, and it reminded me so much of those DuBois years. It's like, no, it doesn't matter who our coach is. We play defense here, and we're gonna stop you.
Do you remember the play that never happened?
Say again.
It's called The Play That Never Happened. Is that there's actually a Daniel Moore painting of it?
Ready to play tonight.
I don't know. You had to refresh my memory.
1992 National Championship game.
Uh-huh.
George Teague gets beat.
They're telling me you do impersonation.
Yeah.
He walks down Lamar. What was his name? Thomas. I think his name was Lamar Thomas. He walks him down.
How you doing?
Takes the ball away from him.
You're doing great.
I remember that.
All right. Turns around, starts running, tackle.
Uh-huh.
Alabama was offsides.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that was the play that we remember that, but Alabama was offsides.
So that play didn't actually happen.
It was the play that never happened. Alabama was offsides.
Dude, they have played that thing on a highlight reel for 30 plus years now, acting like it was the decisive play in the game.
And it was offsides. It never happened.
Finds Hulk, who dances out of bounds. Did not get the first down, though.
You know what's funny is I have a friend who's actually a Miami fan. And to this day, I can't get him to admit that because he's also a Cowboys fan. And, you know, he's about your age. He's a little older than me. And I kept telling him, like, why don't you just admit that you're a Miami and a Dallas fan? Because when you were little, when you were growing up, your formative years, that's who was good. He's like, no, I liked them even before they were good. But, like, yeah,
I think I
whatever.
like the Cowboys.
But
That's some of my bad ones.
With the carry.
But anyway, so he was a Miami fan. And do you know that one time he told me that play with George Teague, you know, that he reminisced about that play, and he said, man, when that play happened, I was so mad. I was screaming at the TV. And I'm like, well, now I know he's full of it because that play never happened.
Really, it's only
and they got it. I mean, it was that stuff. And they got a Daniel Moore painting. They put in. I don't know if you remember it or not, but they put in a defense that they called cover zero.
Man, I
And-
don't remember. I was 11 years old.
Well, Bill Oliver put in this defense. It was called cover zero.
Mhm.
And he put it in like a day before. They didn't even go over it. And what they did was they walked 11 men up on the line of scrimmage. They had no linebackers. They had no defensive backs. They had 11 men on the line of scrimmage. 5 down linemen, 6 down linemen, and them standing right behind them. And they said when they looked, when Oliver first called it, all the players started jumping up and down the hall and the huddle yells, "Yeah, coach called it, coach called it, coach called it." And they walked up there to the line. And they said they looked at Gino Toretta's eyes, and they say nothing but fear. And he snapped the ball and just chunked it. And then they called it again and walked up to the line. He called timeout, and he walked over there and he got on the headsets. And he said, "What are they doing?" And the offensive assistant said, "I don't know. Just give us a few series and we'll figure it out." And he said, "A few series?" He said, "The damn game will be over by then."
Just knows where he's gonna be.
That was a game right there. Jay Barker's stats in that game. He was 4 out of 13 for 18 yards passing with 2 interceptions. They just ran right through them.
In the pocket, and that one's to Falk again. He's going to go out of it.
I mean, they could. I mean, the Alabama just ran. I mean, that was.
Dude, you should write an Alabama book because I swear you're like an Alabama historian.
What's amazing is my friend. My friend was talking about some games the other day, and I was going series by series some of the LSU games, and he said, "Man, I can't believe you remember all that." And I said, "Well, the bad thing about it is I was drunk during those games. Imagine if I was sober."
Jesus, it's like playing pool. I always say, man, I play better pool when I've had a few. Maybe it's kind of one of those situations that you remember it because you've had a few.
You remember that game when Alabama? I think it was the game. Yeah, I know it was the game that Alabama won 20-13 in overtime. But in the third quarter, LSU had the ball like 8 minutes and kicked, and just this methodical drive, and only got a field goal out of it.
Yeah.
I love one of those drives when you hold on to it for 9.5, 10 minutes. There's just nothing that takes somebody's will away more than that.
Yeah, I was thinking about that today when Ole Miss was driving there, in the last few minutes, and they're eating up all that clock. And I'm like, man, all right, I wish we could have shut them down a little bit better. But if they march all this way and come up with nothing, it's going to be like a soul eater. It's going to just gouge them. And that's really exactly what it did. This was really old school Bama, like you said. I loved that if you watch the beginning of the game, QB for Ole Miss, Jackson Dart, he was a lot of smiles. He was smiling and there's a couple plays where his helmet popped off and he's getting in the ref's face saying it, hey, that was targeting. He's just always like laughing and smiling. Well, you know what? I tell you who wasn't laughing and smiling at the end of the game, and that was, Senior Dart. I mean, and I miss that Alabama. I miss that Alabama that can have a highly touted quarterback come in with some fanfare and with some credibility, and then have him walking off the field like, what just happened? You think of like Zach Mettenberger battle crawling to the sidelines because Alabama's just completely beating him into the ground. That Alabama defense. I miss that. That's what we need. I knew this year would be a good year, not necessarily a championship year, but that it would be a good year if we could get that defensive identity back. And I'm over the talking heads. I'm completely over. Even Feinbaum. You know what? Feinbaum tried to defend Pete Golding after the Texas game. He said, that Kevin Steele's defense gave up more yards and points than Pete Golding's defense. And I'm sitting there going, hey, dumbass, are you not aware that Quinn Ewers only played 2 possessions in that game?
In Washington.
You know, of course he's going to put up better numbers. He's in the friggin' game. You know, so I'm sick of it. I'm over it. You know, I finally decided years ago, you know, when I stopped listening to those guys was 2012. When I listened to those experts, or well, I'm sorry, let me do this the right way. Experts sit there and talk about how great Notre Dame was, and it was at that point that I realized, man, these guys are pilfering for ratings. You know, obviously they're not going to be honest, because if they were honest, they would sit there and they would say, okay, look, Notre Dame's not the caliber of Alabama. If they win, it'll be a great upset. But they can't do that, because if they do that, no one's going to watch the game. You know,
Right.
It's not just the people who live in the state of Alabama that they need to watch the national championship. There's people in all the other states. You know, the other 51 states in the United States that they need to watch the friggin' national championship. People in Alabama are going to watch anyway. The people in Indiana are going to watch anyway. They need everybody else to watch. So they have to sell them on the idea that it's going to be a good game, so that they can then turn around and sell their ads, their multi-million-dollar ads, to everyone who's going to advertise during said game. So experts, there's no such thing. But I just like to watch football. And I wish people would get over themselves and watch the game and have fun. You know, at the end of the day, this is a game. You know, for these guys on the field, it is their whole life, because if they go on to the NFL, I listened to an interview with Warren Sapp, and it was really a beautiful interview. And I actually am praying for Mr. Sapp that he achieves some of these goals that he set for himself. But Warren Sapp's decided to return to college at his ripe old age and complete his bachelor's degree, and then to get into college coaching. He wants to coach at that level, and he's going to have to get his bachelor's degree. In order to do that, of course, he left early when he was in college, so he's got some work to do, and it's going to be tough, I know, going back to school like that. But I mean, hey, Warren Sapp, you listen to him, he's not an idiot. You know, he's a very intelligent guy, and I think he can do it. But Warren Sapp, you know, said he left early to get his mother off the dirt road she lived on, which is highly respectable, and I certainly believe he did that. And he made that comment. He made a comment that was worth $1 million to me. He said, I need to get in there and help some of these other guys get their mothers off their dirt roads. And so that's what these guys are playing for. So for it to be their whole life, that makes sense to me. But hey, for you and me, you know, guys that got normal jobs, normal lives, man, let's just have fun and watch football. But yeah, if your team loses, guess what? There's always got to be a loser. Somebody's got to lose. You can't have a winner without a loser. Take your L with pride, and then support your team and say, let's get them next time, guys. Don't be such a whiny bitch and sit there and say, oh man, my life is over, season's over, we're going to lose 5-6 games, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. You know what? Get over it. Football, it was invented to have fun. Let's have fun.
All right, man. Anything else to add? Because I'm fixing to call it a night.
In closing, I'm going to say, I'm going to reemphasize, don't be a whiny bitch.
guys on the
No,
field.
and they
ran. You saw.
And we will talk soon.
On that left side, right
That
where
was
the
good.
ball hit.
All right, buddy.
Like defense.
All right, man.
Was missing the defensive end.
Well, have a good night.
Both teams got stopped.
And hey, you wanna I think this is actually I kind of like this format. If we can do a prediction show on Friday nights and then a reaction show on Saturday nights,